Hey, welcome to our CEO Fireside Chat series. I'm Liz Scott, CEO of Brighter Strategies, and today I am joined by Swafia Ames. Swafia leads much of our leadership and organizational development work. So, Swafia, I know you spend most of your time working directly with leadership teams and executives who are trying to become better leaders. And in this changing environment we've got, I'm wondering what's got your attention right now? What are you thinking about when it comes to leadership development?
Oh my gosh. Hi, Liz. So excited to be here chatting with you. Ay, ay, ay. Leaders, we are all fighting so many battles on multiple fronts simultaneously. On one front, we've got just this core business challenge. We're trying to deliver real value to our customers, clients with frankly less resources, less budget, less time, less staff, less certainty. On another front, we have this, very human side, which I get into a lot with my clients, of leading the team. People are coming to work with a lot. Life is lifing, things are heavy. There's anxiety about the economy. There's gratitude. Thank God I have a job. There's this quiet resilience that says, look, we're going to get through this. We got a job to do. We're going to get it done. I'm showing up, and leaders have to hold space for all of that while keeping the work moving, as I like to say, keeping the lights on, keeping the bills paid, keeping the mission work strong. And then, with the work that I do, there's a front that we're not always talking about enough, but the leaders themselves. Leaders are human. They don't, especially in this current climate that we're all operating in, they don't have all the answers. They feel the weight of that uncertainty. They definitely are struggling with their own self care, and growth matters just as much as anyone else on the team. So, it's a lot. There's a lot of battles being fought. I do have hope. I always am going to have hope. I see the best teams that I'm working with right now. They're not waiting for these perfect answers. They're coming together. They're collaborating. They're supporting each other, and they're leading with empathy, and they're just finding a way through together. But that's a lot. And I can talk about that all day. But yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm seeing a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I love that you've started sort of with what's shifted in the landscape. And I think the reality is that leaders, what they're working with today is different, as you've pointed out. It's different from a couple of years ago. And I hear that from so many of our clients. And I think, it's not a lack of like commitment or intelligence or ability. It's that, to your point, the job of leading has fundamentally changed. And our infrastructures, our culture, what's happened around us has changed. So as a leader, you're not just setting strategy anymore, but now, to your point, you're trying to manage energy, you're navigating ambiguity, you're holding space for people, and you're doing all that while you're trying to deliver on the mission.
Absolutely. I mean, and layer on top of all of that, just the pace of technology, AI. It's just not about adopting new tools or upskilling people. It's the constant question of whether can our workforce keep up with the demands of our target populations, constituency, the shifting political landscape that might be affecting how some of our organizations either deliver services, especially like the public health sector, the social impact sector. Like there's so many ways that you're trying to figure out, what do I do for my teams? And then there's the workplace itself, right, Liz? Hybrid and remote teams, they aren't new anymore. This is something that we all were foisted upon us by, for the good or the ill, post COVID. But there is this challenge of how do we build real culture, real cohesion, real productivity across states. In some places people are working across different distances, across screens, and this just requires so much more intentionality. And so I always joke, like, there's that day job, like the real work, the mission work, the work that you're doing, then there's also that internal work of how do I keep the workforce thriving and healthy. And so as a leader, you're just absorbing all of this all the time, and you're asking yourself, where do I focus? Do I understand what's changing? Am I communicating this effectively to my team? And how do I cut through all the noise to get them to stay on focus of the mission work that organizations are here to do?
Yeah, and I have to imagine that groups that aren't investing in their leaders are really feeling it. I know that I've been reading lots of articles and I see it with some of our clients. There's high turnover, there's burnout, there are teams that just aren't aligned. Are you seeing any of that in your own work?
Absolutely. I mean, historically, when we used to talk about, and I've been around a minute, just a little longer than than a 10-year, little couple decades behind my belt here. But historically, when we talked about leadership development, it was really about that annual retreat or a workshop or some professional development dollars, and you took it upon yourself to go out and do something. But I don't think that that model meets the moment. Leaders and emerging leaders really need something far more meaningful, more sustained, and something more than just once a year. So for me, when I talk to my clients, we're really talking about how are we actively nurturing and developing the leaders we have? What skills and competencies do they actually need right now?
Yeah.
Not just keep the organization afloat, but to have it genuinely thrive. And so that intentionality is so important because there's unless you're like that one motivated person that doesn't need sleep, and I need a lot of sleep, that can be up for 24 hours doing the day work, taking care of our families, and then also building myself professionally. Like, you need some alignment with that, and hopefully that's supported by your organization.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about like, going to a conference, which is awesome. But I know I've gone to a bunch of conferences and I write down all the ideas that I have. And then you get back to work and you're like, somewhere I had a notebook with ideas. And you just, you're like, I was well intentioned, right? Or the same thing. Like sometimes your employer will bring a speaker in for like a half day workshop. Again, awesome. You write down all this stuff and then it kind of reminds me of like a crash diet in some ways. Like you get this burst of energy and you get some ideas, but in the long run, it doesn't stick because you didn't do it in sort of a systemized sort of way. So I'd love for you just to talk a little bit about when you think about it from a more systemized approach, not that one off. When we think
Mhm.
about leadership development, what's an arc of that sort of engagement look like if a client were to work with you or with us here at Brighter Strategies?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too, because at the end of the day, you're talking about adult learners, right?
Yeah.
And we all got out of college for a reason, because sitting there, being lectured to, somebody telling you something versus you experientially, playing with it, isn't the same. We don't see that, what we call the transfer of learning. If I sit in a one-off conference or one-off training and somebody says something to me that sounds amazing in the moment, and like you, I have a bunch of notebooks.
Yeah, go write that down.
I take about 5 seconds, like, I can't find it, moving on. But really is, how do we customize? How do we create something that feels compelling to the work that I'm doing? So when we think about an engagement with and the work that we do with our clients, it's let's do a real case study. Let's do an action learning project. Let's come up with some real events or challenges or issues that your team is facing, and let's build that into it. Let's incubate some ideas. Let's come up with some new tools to help folks navigate what they're doing. So it's not the crash diet, it's transformational. You're in the gym, you've got a whole new body, you're feeling good, your joints don't ache, and you've actually got new tools for your toolkit. So you've got to sort of take some structure around what could be a core concept, and then really sort of personalizing it, so that when I go back to my desk, I'm not thinking about that notebook where I wrote it down, but it's actually actively integrated into the learning and the transfer of learning that carries back to the work.
So I love what you were talking about adult learners and the transfer of learning. I think adults learn through example. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering, without breaking confidences or sharing the name of an organization, can you give us an example of a leadership development journey that you went on with a client, something that really created a trajectory of change for them?
Absolutely. One of my favorite organizations. They're despite some of the things we're seeing, they're growing tremendously, adding new locations. They've got this very dynamic, committed executive leadership team that really have been operating in a startup mentality. And if anybody comes from that sort of entrepreneurial startup mentality, it's all hands on deck. It's everybody plays a part in every single role. But as the organization has grown and started to expand, we were seeing some tensions around people being in each other's swim lanes. So, had the wonderful opportunity to work collaboratively with this 5-person team, interviewed them, came up with some values that align how they function as a team, came up with decision making frameworks for each of the different functional areas, and really started to think about how they function and operate as a team. And then, really, the great news for them, which they were like, oh, yeah, we do have 50 people in our organization now. It's not just the five of us. How do we push down all of these things that we owned as the sort of founding members of this organization to the rest of our expanding and growing team? And some of the, I would say, sort of emotional triumphs that came out of that work, sort of establishing their executive team charter, really drilling down into how they make decisions, introduce RACI as a, sort of framework for them to sort of navigate. I've been fortunate enough to sort of keep in touch with them. And I see them using their tools, using their communication skills, really sort of centering their values and how they interact with each other to lead the rest of the organization. That's one of my favorite stories, and always keep in touch. Hey, how's it going? Y'all doing good? So, but yeah, that's just a small example of one client that I've worked with in the past year that I've seen how that sort of centering and alignment of that executive team and their values has really continued to catapult the growth of their organization in a very phenomenal way.
I love that part where you were like, and then they realized they had a 50-person organization. So it's not just like the individual leaders in a vacuum, right? But like, how does the leadership team make the whole more effective? So how do we communicate differently, make decisions differently? It's really that kind of ripple effect. When the leadership team gets healthier, the whole organization feels it. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you think about, culture shifting for folks and all these things happening in people's lives and worlds right now, and you start thinking about the idea of some leadership development, if someone is watching this and thinking, I maybe need something like that, what is the right next step, or what's the right fit for somebody who might be looking for some leadership development work?
Yeah, I mean, as we think about leadership development, leaders are stepping into many different roles. I would say it's always good to start with a conversation. I'd be happy to chat with anyone, get a sense of sort of what your needs are, identify key strengths, identify areas for growth, and where are we going? Are we stepping into different roles? Are leaders feeling stuck? Are we wanting a more confidential thought partner? Are we navigating a high stakes situation? But really sort of understanding what is that trajectory, or just want to be more intentional about how you're leading, right? So it could be any of those things. It could be self-growth. I always think about, Liz, I know this is going to be like, oh, she says this all the time. I think about leadership as a trifecta. You're leading yourself. So there's that self-work, right? How am I growing as an individual? You're leading others, which is how I show up to inspire and motivate folks, and then leading the organization, which is how am I in my leadership representing the values of the organization, the mission, the work, the goals, the initiatives, all the things that make up how an organization functions. So when you think about sort of this engaging in any kind of leadership development, it really is about being a little bit introspective and thoughtful about where it is you want to go and what you want to do, and then hopefully working with a good partner to curate the right curriculum or the right path forward for your leadership team.
The thing that struck me about what you just said is this idea that you've got to manage yourself as well as manage others. And it kind of reminds me like when you get on an airplane and they're like, put the mask on yourself before you help the person next to you. So if as an organization, we're not ready for a full-scale leadership development program, maybe I'm just thinking about coaching for myself. Are there any signals or anything that might tell me that like I need the oxygen mask for myself? Like, what's the right time for that?
Yeah, I think any time is the right time. And hopefully one of the biggest, I think, gifts that I've had, Liz, in my professional journey, even, here at Brighter Strategies, is having peers, colleagues, mentors, friends, sometimes family look at me and be like, hey, you need this. like come back to the light. I see you growing in this area, or looking at the strategic direction of our industry, of our sector, and saying, hey, this is a skill set that I might need to develop. This is something I need to get stronger in. This is where I'm trying to grow. So again, when you're thinking about leading yourself, what does that look like? It could look like engaging a coach or having support from your organization in engaging a coach. It could be a very tailored development plan for you as a professional if you're stepping into a new role or looking into step into a new role or opportunity within your organization. So again, it really is that sort of introspective, reflective piece, and just knowing that in the landscape of leadership development, there are certifications, coaches, trainings. There's so
Mhm.
many tools available to you to navigate your leadership journey.
Awesome. So we have a question from somebody who's watching the live stream, and they want to
Okay.
know, do you have any tips for leaders who are trying to make space for themselves as they're trying to do this, as they're trying to support people? Like, how do I create space to manifest and make this happen?
Yeah. I mean, this is the put your mask on first, right? And what does that mean for you personally, ritualistically, whether that's time blocking, whether that's I'm a fond fan of, resetting and recharging.
Yeah.
How do you start your day? You know what I mean? Don't start your day on your phone, checking Slack. That's a horrible way to start your day. Building in that extra
You're
30
talking
minutes in the morning. I know. Sometimes I have to tell myself, no, put the phone down. But it is about your self care, and I call it self care, self love. It's not selfish. It's not sort of avoided. It is like what are the things that bring me oxygen,
yeah.
right? And that differs for all of us. For me, it's yoga, it's meditation, it's good little murder TV, which my husband hates. But sometimes after a particularly stressful meeting, I'll go turn on oxygen and watch a nice, 10 minutes of Snap to reset my brain. Would not advise that for everybody. But what is that for you, right? You've got to identify that, and you've got to put your mask on first. You've got to, view a little self-care, and then you can go back into the breach, back into the fray, back into the grind. And hopefully you're doing it with a recharged, renewed sense of purpose and energy. So I think that's so important. But you got to figure out what that is for you and make it a part of how you function.
Such a great answer. Swafia, it has been such a rich conversation. For folks who are watching and want to learn more, or maybe want to explore some coaching or some leadership development for themselves or for their team, what should they do?
Reach out. Call me. No, definitely reach out. Reach out to Brighter Strategies. We're happy to have an exploratory conversation, whether it's coaching an individual leader, developing a team. We've designed a bunch of assessments that are data driven and kind of help us sort of diagnose. We have a broader leadership academy, anything, no pressure, just a real conversation. Would love, love, love to hear from you. So, and thank you. Thank you for the time. It's always great chatting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, as Swafia mentioned, if anyone is interested in a free consultation or a chat with Swafia, we'll put some information around today's session. We'll put a link below. And thank you so much for joining us for our very first live stream. We're planning on doing these monthly, so you'll get a chance to meet some of our other team members and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And I think the next one in March, we're going to be talking to Jaleesa Johnson about employee engagement. So, Swafia, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And we'll see everybody soon. Bye.
Bye.